And how would you connect equity to diversity?
So yes, so diversity, so I describe diversity as diversity just means that you have different perspectives, different kinds of people, right, on your team. I mean, diversity is a fruit salad, right? Um, and that's a starting place, right? So if you don't have any diversity, that's where you need to start to build, right?
Mm-hmm.
To get new voices at the table. Equity is where you start to adapt your environment so that it meets the needs of those different voices that you've brought to the table. So it's, if you think of it as a ladder, right? You have to start by building some diversity, and then you're working your way towards inclusion, right? Making sure that people are interacting with each other,
Mm-hmm.
feeling comfortable, and then you end up in a place where there is that agility that takes care of every member of the team. So there's
Okay.
sort of like diversity, the start of inclusion, and equity at the top.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, Laura's back.
Oh, nice.
I'm so sorry about that, guys, but you're having a really, really interesting conversation.
Oh, that's all right. Don't worry.
I am just trying to make sure that the Facebook is streaming correctly, and it keeps giving me an error, and I don't know if it's just me. But I think, yeah, okay, yep, we're live. All right, bye.
Hi. Um, Laura,
See,
I'll message you.
great.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I see a lot of people are joining now. I'll give us like 30 seconds to 1 minute to wait for everyone so we can start the webinar. So I think we can start. Again, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Entrepreneurial Snacks. We're super glad to have everyone here joining us. My name is Luisa Barbosa, and along with Stefania Lopez, we run the Entrepreneurship Committee at ALPFA. Stefania is on vacation this week, so it's going to be just me. And Valerie, do you mind just passing to the next slide? So ALPFA, it's the Association of Latino Professionals in America. So we have like a national, like we have our national chapter, and like here local in Boston. It is such a great community like to be part of. And our mission is to provide opportunities for leadership development, community and engagement, networking with Latino men and women in the greater Boston area. Such a great opportunity. Like I invite everyone to like check our website and social media. It's a great part. It's a great thing to be part of this community. And the next one, Valerie. So today we're starting this entrepreneurial snacks with Valerie Zolezzi-Wyndham. Valerie is talking to us today about how to lead through change and focusing on like equity. And before we start this webinar, Valerie and I were talking about like such a great timing to be talking about equity, diversity, and inclusion in our lives and in the workspace. So I'm gonna pass the mic to Valerie. Welcome to Snacks, and she will start her presentation and introduce herself.
Great, thank you, Luisa, for introducing me, and thank you to ALPFA for inviting me. I am the owner of a company called Promoting Good, so an entrepreneur like many of the people I think who are on this call. I am a Mexican Latina from Mexico City, but I've been in Massachusetts now for 20 years, and I'm excited to be here to talk to you about how to lead through change. A little bit about me. I trained as a lawyer. I went to BU and worked professionally as a lawyer for 17 years. And I left my practice in 2017 to start my company. I do a lot of community work around social justice and health issues in my community, and come to this work with a lot of passion and creativity and a real commitment to excellence. A little bit about Promoting Good. My work crosses sectors. So I work in the nonprofit sector, in the private space, also in the state government, helping boards of directors to lead, helping organizations to think about creative strategies for their work, helping partners to come together to have broader impact through those strategic partnerships. and helping organizations to think about how to diversify their revenue strategies. And then lastly, and I end here not because it's the least important, but actually because it's the focus of what we'll talk about, and the real reason why I founded Promoting Good. You know, I have had the opportunity to work in Mexico and across the United States in a range of environments that have ranged from very inclusive to not inclusive at all. And so I really am focused on helping organizations to do learning and planning, and then to take action to create work environments that work for all employees. So what are we going to talk about today in our 30 minutes? I'm going to talk to you a little bit about change, about how to inspire, lead, and empower your team and your colleagues. I'm going to talk about authenticity and equity, and then I'll share some advice for how to manage these really difficult times that we are facing together as a society, but also as individuals who are, you know, struggling probably with what is happening on a personal level at work, you know, thinking about your colleagues. And so that's the agenda for today. Because we are talking about some issues that can be difficult, I like to share some conversational norms. So I want to share that this is a learning environment. And one thing I will say about this work is that all of us, even people like me who do diversity, equity, and inclusion work and anti-racism work for a living, make mistakes. And so we're in a learning environment, and we should all be open to getting feedback and to acknowledging mistakes that we make. Of course, we want to speak with care and speak from our own personal experience. I think it's really important that we listen to each other, and that we don't judge. We don't know other people's experiences, and so that we assume that when people speak, that they speak with good intentions. And then lastly, that this is a collaboration. So I do have these slides where I'm going to share content with you, but we want to leave space for you to ask questions at the end, so that it's a collaboration, a learning community. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about change, and specifically to frame us in this moment that we're in, because we're seeing change at a lot of different levels. And so starting at the top, right, we're societally, and not just in Boston, right, but nationally and globally, experiencing the real challenges that COVID has presented, you know, to individuals, to the individuals who are sick, to the individuals who have lost employment, or who've had their employment change, and to the economic impact, of course, of that. And then more recently to the really important Black Lives Matter movement that already existed, right? That movement started in 2013, but that has been reignited by the deaths this year, and the murders by police of Breonna and of George Floyd. And so that's the societal level change that we're experiencing, and it's important to acknowledge that. And then, of course, changes at home, right? All of us are adjusting to working at home, or maybe to being essential workers out in the community, and then having to manage coming back home safely. And then, of course, adjusting if you have any children in your house to the learning that's happening, you know, or if you live with other people, to how it is to manage everybody at home, trying to do what they need to do. And so a lot of change. And then, of course, changes that are happening at work. And change is hard, change is stressful, and most of us don't embrace change. And so I think it's important just to acknowledge that that change is happening. If you struggle with change, you know, take deep breaths and think about what you can do to prepare yourself emotionally to be able to make the change that you need to make, so that you can thrive in these times, because there is the ability to thrive, and you want to be in that space. All right, so what does it mean to lead through change? I have 4 bullets here, and then I'll talk a little bit, sort of grounding those bullets in some experience. I think it's really important to be purposeful. So when you're stressed out and when you are managing change, it's sort of very easy to just rush and take action, and to try a lot of different things. And so I think it's really important to hit pause and to think about, what is it that's the best thing that I can do with my time, with the resources, with the skills that I have. And so really being purposeful is important. And so take that time to think about the ways that you can have the most impact. And just to give an example, I shared the 5 areas of work where I focus. When COVID hit, I had to hit pause and think about, all right, in this new world, like what is possible? Where can I have the most impact? And so I have shifted course entirely, and I'm just working in the anti-racism, diversity, and inclusion space, because there's a real need for that, and it's a skill that I have, and also it's something that's just much more manageable for me as a small entrepreneur to manage. And so that would be sort of an example of how to be purposeful. If you're working with teams, really important to be thinking about, how you communicate, and to make sure that you're communicating well. And that means clearly, directly, kindly, but also that you're doing that communication often. And then of course, you might be stressed while your team is stressed. And that's whether you supervise folks or whether you have colleagues that you're working with. So take care of each other, check in with each other, ask each other how things are going, see how you can support each other and help each other to rise together. And then lastly, you're going to get frustrated. I've had some frustrating days where I feel like I've not had the impact that I want, or where no business has come in, or where I have really challenging conversations with people. And I think it's easy to sort of get into bed and hide under the covers. And maybe you do that for a little bit, but really important to not get too frustrated, not to give up, and to keep at it, always going back to your purpose. All right, so I think it's really important to be inspiring and to be leading and to be empowering others. And particularly as I think about this community of Latina, Latinx professionals, we need to support each other, empower each other, and inspire each other. And so I encourage you to set and to communicate a vision. And this you can do with your team, but also for yourselves. How are you sort of creating your purpose and sharing your purpose so that you can be marketable and known for being that really special person that you are. So setting and communicating that vision is really important. Really important, I think, to be open and honest. I think especially right now, things are hard for a lot of people, and it's actually a time where I think you can have permission to say what you're struggling with. If you're working for somebody and struggling to get what you need, because maybe you have some needs at home that are different, I think this is when hopefully our employers are being sort of more supportive, more open. And so be open and honest about how you're doing, and invite your team to also share what their struggles are. Because it's only if you can overcome those challenges that you're going to have success. The other thing that's extraordinarily important, so for those of us, and I don't count myself in this category, but for people who are who tend to not delegate, in these times, that's really, really difficult. And so, empower your team, tell them what their scope of work is, and then let them lead. You will see so much more creativity, make your team happy, make them feel supported, and then you'll have the breathing space to do the things that you really need to focus on. So that's really important. And then adapt. So all of the rules that existed are gone, right? Or maybe not all of them, but many of them. And so if you are trying to do your work in the same exact way as you did it pre-COVID, you're likely not going to have a lot of success. And so encourage creativity, encourage new approaches, and even in your own work, think about how you can change your schedule, how you can change how you do your work to have more impact. And then lastly, celebrate any win, whether it's a personal win, a family win. Again, these times are really stressful. And so the more you can find those moments of glimmer and of hope, that's how you're going to recharge so that you have the energy to continue in these really hard times. All right, so I want to talk next about authenticity, and then I'll talk about equity. So what do I mean by that? I have had the privilege of working in Latin America, of working here in the United States in a bunch of different sectors. And I will admit that I have not always felt like I could really be who I am, right? That I could share my opinions or share the things, whether it's the cultural practices, the beliefs that I had, and that takes a toll on you. And so I think we need to find a way to support each other, to demonstrate to the business world, right, that we are rock stars professionally, but also that we bring characteristics and skills and just a perspective that has value, value to the team, value to the customer. And so I really encourage you to find ways to really be who you are. And at the same time, though, to be open to growing, right? So we all have strengths and we all have weaknesses. And I think it's important to know what those are and to be open to growing without feeling like you have to compromise your values or who you are. Really important, I think, to understand your work environment, to understand the value and the leadership styles that seem to govern, and then to figure out sort of how you can put the puzzle pieces together, where you can be your authentic self in a way that works in that environment, and in fact, where maybe the unique qualities that you have are a value add to those things that are important at your company. Now, I will say there are a few work environments where you may not be able to put those puzzle pieces together, and I think it's very hard to leave a job, especially right now when there are so many people who are out of work. But if you are in a place that really doesn't see your value, be strategic about figuring out a journey so that you can get to an environment that really is going to appreciate who you are and the skills that you bring. But obviously do that with care. And then the last thing I'll just say is, even though I'm telling you to be who you are, you do want to be adaptive. So you do want to be open to growing and to sort of adapting how you communicate. Again, still while being true to who you are. And then I want to end by talking about equity. And Luisa and I were talking before this call about what that means. And she wanted to know sort of how it connects to the term diversity. And so I'll first describe what diversity is and then talk about inclusion and then equity. So diversity is a word used a lot. And it actually just means a bunch of different things. So it could be a fruit salad, right? It could be a diversity of professional skill sets, right? So on a board of directors, you want to have a banker, maybe an accountant, a lawyer, an IT guy or gal. And so diversity just means those different things in a room. But it also means, if we're talking about demographics, right, that you have a team that isn't all white, but also that isn't only Black or Mexican, right? So diversity means that you're bringing lots of different perspectives to a space. And in this work, if you don't have diversity, that's where you have to start, right? But that is just the baseline. The next step on the journey to equity is about inclusion, right? So as you start adding new perspectives to your workspace, are those people actually included, right? Or do they sit separately to the side? Do you value what they have to say? Are they heard in the same way as others? And so when you get to a place where you feel like everybody is listened to at the table, everybody is valued, everybody can participate, that's when you have inclusion. And lastly, equity. So equity is about everyone having what they need to succeed. So for example, if you have somebody who has a different ability, giving them a tool that's going to allow them to do their job and bring the excellence that they have, right? But perhaps they need something, a tool. Another kind of equity, though, is thinking about what the culture of your environment is, and is it one that welcomes different perspectives? And so I was, again, sort of saying to Luisa earlier, if on your team you only talk about sports, what if you have folks on your team who aren't into sports and all of the social conversation is about that? There are people who feel excluded. If only the leaders talk and the team doesn't talk, again, sort of is there equity in terms of the voices that are being shared at the table? And so really important to be thinking about, one, what can you do to add equity, but also what can you ask for if you're in a work environment that's going to change those dynamics to create an innovative, creative team. And mindful of the time. So really important to note the differences that we have, our different needs, our different experiences, our different approaches, to come together around some shared values that guide you, but that still reflect the richness of perspectives. To do this work, you need to get to know people. So talk to people, and don't just talk to the people who look like you, talk to others, get to know them, ask them, how can I make this a better place for you? Or actually, I need you to make this a better place for me. This is what I need. And be flexible. We each work in different ways. And so the more flexibility you allow, the more likely it is that everybody's going to be able to give their best. And then something that I think that this is like a very logistical thing, you should actually have rules of engagement. In the same way that I started this conversation with our norms for this discussion, your team should have a set of guidelines that help you to know how you can communicate to each other. And so think about how to do some of those things in your work environment. I promise you'll come out stronger. And all of that is going to help you to build trust, which is really, really important, and which I'm sure you all value in your workspaces. So I want to end, and then we're going to open it up to questions with just some practical tips that I have for you. Whatever you do for work, focus on equity, both for your staff and for your client communities. If you have clients who aren't English speaking, or maybe who aren't Spanish speaking, figure out ways to make language accessibility a priority. If you have a lot of parents on your team, think about how you can support them given the situation we're in. 2, expect change, and actually welcome change. You can grow a lot by trying new things. Be flexible, and that's both with your schedule and with your work. Anticipate that you're going to continually need to pivot as we figure out what this new world is going to look like. Be generous with your gifts. So, donate of your time, give of your gifts at work, learn and try new things. I have learned to do all of these things remotely that I didn't know how to do before. And I am better for it. And so don't be scared to try new things. And then lastly, take care of yourself. Set and respect boundaries, both for your colleagues and for yourself. Take time for yourself. Self-care really matters. So I am going to end there and just open it up. And I think Luisa is going to help me with some questions that might have come in.
Yes. So for all the participants, you can drop some questions on the Q&A. I have some questions that some people sent in advance. A very common question is if you recommend any books for the participants to read or like to learn more about it.
Yes. So lots of really great resources. One book that I really highly recommend is a book called So You Want to Talk About Race? And it's written by an author whose last name is Aluo. She worked in IT in Seattle for a long time, and now focuses on helping people in workspaces have conversations about race. It is a really great read if you are trying to figure out sort of how to understand what's going on, why people feel such injustice. So that is a really, really great read. The other thing that I'd suggest, I mean, the Harvard Business Review has a lot of articles that are being posted right now and shared on LinkedIn that have to do with creating inclusive environments. So those are maybe the two places where I'd start.
Great. We have a question coming in. So I think this talk was excellent. I work in a super non-diverse environment. How do I manage up to encourage diversity?
Yes, thank you. That is a great question. So what I recommend, and as hard as the current environment is, and I think we are in a moment right now where I am seeing an openness to have these conversations in the workplace that I've never seen before. And I think an ability to push as an employee, when maybe even 6 months ago, it would have been unthinkable, right? Without a lot of power in an institution to make that kind of demand for inclusion. So I would say that, you know, if your company hasn't put out a statement about Black Lives Matter, you should ask those questions. That said, like you as the only or as one of the only employees of color in a business, it is not your job to create the statement. But I think you can ask. You know, I think if you're at a company that doesn't understand the sort of the ethics or the social reasons why this work matters, there's great data that talks about, right, the increased revenue, the increased creativity that comes from a diverse team. And I haven't shared this already with Luisa, but I'll share it with her. I can share an article that actually has that financial case for why diversity matters. And so for folks who who won't be led by the social argument, that financial argument can be really impactful. And then the last thing that I'll say is that it can be helpful to talk to your human resources department. Oftentimes, they know what the problem is, or rather, I should say, they know that the problem exists, but they don't know what to do about it. And the truth is that they just don't know how to connect to different groups. And so maybe that is a place where you can be helpful.
And also, thank you, Valerie. If I can add to
Yes.
that, like in my company, they are really working on like building a very diverse environment. And in order to like manage this up, we're starting conversations between employees in a very informal way. So like once a week, we're talking about social justice, like on a Zoom, 30 minutes, and you can start coming up with ideas. And as Valerie was suggesting, start asking those questions. And of course, it depends company by company, but if you're asking those questions, they can start being managed up, and hopefully like companies will open their eyes to the current situation that we're living.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. Oh, someone asked if the presentation will be shared. It will. I'm just answering all of the questions here. Valerie, you can continue.
Great, thank you. And I just, this slide just has my contact information. I have been sharing on my Facebook and on my Instagram some infographics that provide some tips for how to think about these things. And so I encourage you to take a look at those. And Luisa and the team will share one of those infographics with you via email. You know, I am happy to have a 20-minute conversation with anybody who wants to talk about this that's in the ALPFA community. And so if if you want a little bit of personal advice, or if you want to learn about how I work with organizations, please feel free to reach out and just reference in your email to me that you were on this call.
Perfect. Valerie, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
We really appreciate your like all of the information that you shared, all of the tools. And I also encourage everyone to like check Valerie's website and talk about her work with her. It's amazing.
Thank
And
you.
Valerie, do you mind passing to the next slide?
Yes.
Just want to leave here the invite for our next in 2 weeks, how to create your COVID-19 preparedness plan for coming back to the office or for your company. So thank you everyone for joining today. Again, thank you, Valerie.
Oh, my
Really
pleasure.
appreciate your time and your work. And we hope everyone have a great evening.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you.